What it is, home skillet biscuits. My name is Caleb, and welcome to the Kool Down. The first few episodes of this series have been rooted in dance because that felt like the most natural place to start. But before I could figure out what this channel could be, before I was sitting in front of the camera and telling these stories, I was already doing something else. I was writing. And one of the very first stories I ever tried to write started with something very real. I don't remember the exact day I started writing it, but I do remember the feelings that made me want to write about my first relationship. By the time I was a junior in high school, I was starting to make sense of feelings that I didn't have a language for yet. My emotional maturity was at this crossroads because of how I grew up, who I was becoming, and these new feelings I kept chasing. It was the beginning of a long distance roller coaster that I desperately wanted to close the gap on. Love, identity, self-worth, confusion, desire, all these feelings I was trying to physically touch. And the source of them was this boy that I couldn't stop talking to. And then, after some hiccups and what felt like divine timing, it happened. The distance finally closed. After all that time of talking on the phone and texting, he was real. I could take in his scent, hear how his voice actually processed in my ears, feel his skin interlocked with mine, and it was quite euphoric. But eventually, things became rocky. I think reality started settling in and I needed some way to make sense of everything. I didn't really have anyone to talk to who knew what I was going through or anyone who knew about my sexuality at that point, so I turned to writing. I started typing away the moment our first split happened, but something about it was too spot on. It wasn't satisfying me. It was weird. It felt like a journal entry wearing a costume, and I didn't understand why it wasn't doing what I needed it to do. Eventually, we linked back up, still long distance, and as I navigated the relationship and the new direction it was going, my perspective changed, and so did my writing. It was as though everything I was writing, the characters, the environment, turned to me and said, but how does this make you feel? And that is when something else entered the room. Something I've been drawn to for my entire existence, the supernatural. When I get this feeling, something's about to happen. Thinking about it now though, it makes sense. My emotional experience with this relationship felt strange, impossible, even haunting. So naturally, my brain rewired the story to dissect the meaning of it. I started adding supernatural elements. The direction of that changed. It became less about writing down exactly what happened and more so bringing my feelings to life. I didn't add the strange things to escape the truth. I added them because the truth was strange. And to this day, I still chip away at the story. I come back to it, I relive moments in time. I send myself through this emotional roller coaster trying to embody and envision what my younger self was trying to uncover. The novel started with him, yeah, but I don't think it's about him anymore. I think it's about the first time that love made me feel real. Not just liked, not just wanted, but actually real. Like suddenly there was a person in my life that could see the version that I was trying to understand. But it was also about distance. Physical distance because we were long distance. Emotional distance because I was still learning how to say what I felt. And this other kind of distance too. The distance between who I was, who I wanted to be, and who I felt safe enough to be out loud. Because at that time, I didn't have the language for everything that I was experiencing. I didn't have a room full of queer friends helping me understand what I was going through. So a lot of those feelings had nowhere to go. The love, the confusion, the secrecy, the self-worth questions, the wanting to be chosen, the wanting to be touched, the wanting to close the gap and finally make this thing real. So I put it into a story. And the more I come back to it, the more the memory changes. Not because I was lying about it, because memory does that. You revisit something often enough and it starts rearranging itself around the person you are now. What felt romantic back then feels lonely now. What felt exciting might reveal itself as fear. What felt like love might be a search for proof that I was worth loving. And somewhere in all that, the story became supernatural. Because love can feel like a haunting, even when no one is trying to haunt you. Sometimes a person leaves your life, but the version that they awaken stays behind. And I think that's what I was really writing about. Not him, not us, but the version of me that existed because of that relationship. The version of me that was trying to understand desire, identity, secrecy, trust, and self-worth with no map. Reality had the facts, but fiction had room for feeling. And I think that's why I keep coming back to the story, even now. Not because I'm trying to relive that relationship, but the story keeps changing as I change. Every time I return to it, I understand a different part of myself. A younger version of me wrote it one way. The version of me now reads it a little differently. And maybe that's what storytelling does. It lets you revisit something without feeling or being trapped inside of it. It lets you turn a memory into something that you can shape, you can hold, question, and sometimes finally release. The first few episodes of the Kool Down were dance-related stories because dance was the most natural place to begin for me. These stories were real, they mattered, they still matter. But this is a part of me too, the writer part. The part that takes something real and lets it become strange enough to finally feel honest. So maybe the stories after this won't always be about dance. Some might be true, some might be inspired by something true, some might begin in reality and drift off into fiction, but the feeling will always be real. And maybe that's the thread. Not the subject, the feeling. Make good choices. Bitch, it's still hot in here.